What's going on, guys? Super Insane 18 here, and today I'm going to be bringing you an updated Sprite deck profile. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and it has changed quite a bit since the last one due to it now being a Tier 0 format. The last Sprite deck profile that I brought you guys was the one that I topped my case tournament with, which was before the Shizu cards came out, so we're going to go ahead and show you guys the updates. Let's get into it. Obviously, we're going to kick things off with the sprites themselves. We are obviously still playing 3 copies of Spright Blue and 3 copies of Spright Jet. This is just mandatory and self-explanatory. I really don't need to tell you guys why. But the one thing that I am still doing that I don't see anybody else doing is playing 2 copies of Spright Red. Now, I do just think that this is correct personally. I know that some people disagree, but let me go ahead and give you my reasoning. Originally, the reasoning behind playing 2 copies of Spright Red was that way if you got Dark Ruler No More, you can just activate Starter and summon another red from your deck and not be dead in the water. But the reason for it now is pretty much just because of the Shizu cards. Your opponent's going to mill potentially 10 cards from you if you are going second, so you don't want to lose out on your only red. Yes, you can always get it back with a Spright Elf, but that requires you to get that far in the first place, not to mention if they have something like Roll Kalos can negate the effect of Elf, so I just want to play 2, that way I always have a backup copy, just to make sure that I'm still able to get to it. And then we are playing 1 copy of Spright Carrot and 1 copy of Spright Pixies. That is 10 Sprite names total in the main board. And again, I just think that that is the personally correct ratio. It just feels like I will never be wanting for a Spright, whereas if you cut, like, let's say the Pixies and one of the Reds, sometimes you just don't open the Sprite names that you need, and that never feels good. So that's going to be it for the Sprites. We are playing 3 copies of Nimble Beaver. It is the best normal summon in the deck, and we are also playing 2 copies of Angler. Now, the reason for the 2 copies of Angler is there's actually 2 of them. Reason number 1 is that if you open one of the beavers and you want to normal summon it, you want to be able to summon an Angler while still leaving an Angler in your deck. That way you can get the maximum efficiency off of a card like Spright Sprint, because if you use Beaver to normal a Beaver, because you're only playing, let's say, 1 Angler, then when you send the Angler off Sprint, you'll only have 1 Nimble to summon, and that just really doesn't work out too well. At that point, there was really no reason to make the Sprint to begin with, so if you are playing 2 Angler, you can just maximize that efficiency. The second reason is also because of Tier Limit. Obviously, Tier Limit will mill you, and if this card is sent from the deck to the graveyard, you can summon 2 Nimbles, so if they hit one, you can go ahead and summon both your Beavers on their turn, and that just leaves you with monsters already on board starting your turn, which if you have Sprite names to special summon just really works out. And that's it for the Nimble package. We are playing 2 copies of Swap Frog. You don't need any more than this. This is just to make sure that we can go into Toad. So yeah, you really don't need any more. And that is it for, like, the engine cards, I guess you would call them. Next, we're going to go into an extender that I really like in this deck, and that is going to be Kashtira Fenrir. I think Fenrir is incredibly important in the Sprite strategy, just because it is a free monster on board. So worst case scenario is you special summon this, search another copy of itself, summon a level 2, and go into Sprint, and then that means you have full combo. But the best case scenario is that you didn't need this to extend, and you're just adding an additional interruption onto your board, because the end board is going to allow you to Toad your opponent potentially 3 times. So having 3 Toads plus a Banish is just kind of a little bit wacky. So I really like the Kashtira Unicorn, or Fenrir, just because, like I said, it's got that, like, multi-fold utility to it. And then we have some hand traps, and all of the hand traps are obviously catered toward tier, because it is a Tier 0 format. Sorry, I'm just putting emphasis on that because I got a comment yesterday. I'll put it on the screen, but it just blows my mind that people would say stuff like this. So if you don't like the content currently, I apologize. That's just the state of the game, but let's go ahead and move on from that. That's going to be 3 copies of Bystial Magnamut, 2 copies of Druis Worm, and 1 copy of Bystial Saronir. This is just what I think is the standard Bystial package, so not really much needs to be said. If you want, you can side extra copies if you're really that scared of Tier Limit, but I think that this is enough, especially when you pair it with the 3 copies of Didi Crow that we are also playing. This should be more than enough to make sure that they're not able to get their fusions off, and that is going to be it for the monsters. Onto the spells. We are playing 1 copy of Spright Smashers. This is just really good non-target removal. Obviously, we have 3 copies of Starter. Why wouldn't you play 3 E-Tellies? And then to finish off these spells, we have 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity. This is just a consistency booster. Sometimes you open, because we're playing such a high like Bystial and DD Crow count, and sometimes you just don't open the level 2s that you need. This gets you there. And that's it for these spells. Onto the traps, we have 1 copy of Spright Double Cross. Now, I see a lot of people not playing this card, and I can understand the reason why. If you're going second, this card is just dead. But if you are going first, it adds incredible utility. Not only can you get rid of a tier monster that they are trying to use in the graveyard to fuse, but you can also use it to reborn your own Toad, giving you a 3rd Toad negate in the turn, as well as using it as a snatch steal to take something threatening from your opponent. So, like, if they make something like Spright Elf, you can go ahead and take their Spright Elf, and even if they've already used it, because it says you can only use it, that is a restriction placed on the player, not the card. So if they, like, let's say they summon Spright Elf, you activate this to steal their Spright Elf. You can take the Spright Elf, and then you can use the Spright Elf to reborn another card, even though they already used it, if they chained it to this. And that's it for Double Cross. I think it's just an incredible utility card for the deck, plus it's searchable. And the last 3 cards, we are playing 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. I think that this is just better over something like Ash, just because stopping something like Kit Kalos is really big. If you're in the mirror match, stopping something like Gigantic is really big. If you're in against something like Flu, they can chain block, so just blanketing one of their normal summon effects, really good. So that is it for the main 40 cards. Let's show you guys the extra. Alright, so onto the extra, we are still playing the 1 copy of Cat Shark. I think that this card is still mandatory because it helps you push for game in scenarios where you otherwise wouldn't, and in the format that we're in, you want to get game as soon as you can. You don't want to try to chip them down. If you can put damage on board, put damage on board. That's really it for Cat Shark. We are playing 1 copy of Gin Buster. This is sort of the backup plan if you're not able to get to your Toad. Sometimes your opponent hand traps you, sometimes they mill your Swap Frogs, there's a million different situations that you wouldn't be able to get to Toad, so if you can't, this is the backup. Then we are playing 1 copy of Onibimaru Soul Sweeper. I think that this is an incredible card. This card quickly became my favorite rank 2 ever once I started playing it in this deck, just because of how good it is. One of the things that I like to tell people when they try to say not to play this card is, if you are against Fluanderies, which is seeing a lot of play because it is a very good tier limit counter, and they make the, they make the Empen. Empen kind of ruins your day because Elf can't be put in defense, but this can. So you summon this in defense, banish the Empen, and then you're pretty much good to continue playing from that point on. So I just think it's an incredible card. Then we are still playing the 1 copy of Toad, don't really need to explain it. We have 2 copies of Gigantic Spright. Again, don't really need to explain it. This is your main go-to first XYZ summon. And then finishing the XYZs, we've got 1 copy of Downard and 1 copy of Zeus. These honestly don't get made too much, but they are very good to have in a niche situation. Sometimes you just need to wipe the board, and this will do it. So yeah, then onto the links. We are playing 1 copy of Spright Sprint. That is all you need. After you use Sprint 1 time, you never want to use it again. There is nothing other than the Nimble package that you want to send from your deck to the grave, so I think that, just 1 is fine. Spright Elf we are playing at 2, which I kind of want to play it at 3, but honestly, there's just not enough room. I think that everything else in the extra deck is much more important than having a 3rd elf. There are a lot of scenarios where a 3rd elf would come up, but not enough to justify cutting any of the other cards here. So if you're watching this and you want to play 3 elf, maybe do a little bit of playtesting, see which one of these cards comes up less, but they all come up enough that, it's not worth cutting. Next we have the Codebreaker Virus Swordsman, and unfortunately this card is mandatory even though it does literally nothing other than out Baguska. It is a Link 2 that has more attack than Baguska has defense, and in playtesting Baguska was just a really big pain in the ass, so you unfortunately need to play this card just so that you have something to swing over the Baguska. Then we are playing 1 copy of Dark the Dark Charmer, as well as 1 copy of our IP Masquerena. These are really self-explanatory. Dark is just able to steal something and let you continue playing. You can summon Dark, steal something, link into Sprint, link into Elf. Doesn't really matter. If you're up against something like Tier Limit, you can summon out their Merly, and then overlay the Dark and the Merly into a Gigantic. It's just got super utility. And the IP is so that we can summon out Mech Knight, Crusadia, Avermax with the protection from from IP, and that is just a really big pain to get rid of. I realized this when I was playing against a player at my locals. I was playing Tier Limit, he was playing Spright. He summoned this, and literally the only out I had was triple tactics talent, so I had to scoop that game, side in my tactics, and then hopefully get it for when he did it again, which thankfully I did, and I was able to non-target take control of it. But getting rid of an IP protected Avermax is just a huge pain, so I decided, you know what, that's definitely worth playing if you want to be able to just put something on board that a lot of players might not be able to out, and that is it for the extra deck. And there you guys have it. That is going to be my updated Spright deck profile for this current December 2022 format. Unfortunately, it is catered mostly towards tier because, again, we are in a tier 0 format, but even if you're not against tier, the Bystials won't really hurt you all that much. There's always going to be lights and darks in the format, and if they are not catered to the matchup that you're in, you just side them out. So the deck is consistent enough that even that high count won't ruin it for you. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, you know the deal. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, comment, share with your friends, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.